I stared at my phone in complete shock as my elderly neighbor Frank screamed through the fence about the wild parties at my dream beachfront house in California. The problem was I hadn't been there in 3 weeks. My hands trembled as I opened the security app, and what I saw on the live feed made my blood run cold. 15 people were splashing in my pool, grilling on my deck, and trash was scattered everywhere. My sister Emma was hosting what looked like a family reunion at my sanctuary, and they had no idea I was watching. The oceanfront property in Carmel had been my grandmother Margaret's final gift to me, though she never knew it would become one. When she passed away 8 months ago, she left me a small inheritance that finally made my dream possible. After working double shifts at my marketing job in Phoenix for 2 years, saving every penny while living in a studio apartment, I had enough for the down payment on this slice of paradise. I remember the day I first walked through that house. The realtor Patricia had warned me it needed work, but when I stepped onto the wraparound deck and saw the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon, I knew I was home. The mortgage payment stretched my budget tight, but this wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary, my writing retreat, the place where I planned to heal from the wreckage of my divorce from Stephen. Emma had been with me during the house hunting process. She helped me pick out the sage green paint for the kitchen walls, the whitewashed furniture for the living room, and even the nautical rope lighting that wrapped around the deck railing. She understood how much this place meant to me, how I needed somewhere peaceful to rebuild my life after Stephen's betrayal had shattered everything I thought I knew about love and trust. Frank Miller had introduced himself the day I moved in my first pieces of furniture. At 72 years old, he'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years and took pride in watching over the seasonal properties when their owners were away. His own cottage sat just 50 yards down the beach, and he'd made it clear that he considered himself the unofficial guardian of our quiet street. But now Frank's voice cracked with frustration as he explained that the noise had been going on for weeks, not just tonight. Pool parties that lasted until 3 a.m, music so loud it rattled his windows, and cars parked all along the narrow coastal road. He'd assumed I'd gone crazy with success, throwing my newfound wealth around like some kind of lottery winner. Through my security camera system, I watched in horror as Emma gave a tour to people I'd never seen before. Her husband, Brad, stood by an elaborate grilling station flipping what looked like expensive steaks while laughing with a group of middle-aged men. Their 3 teenagers, Tyler, Madison, and Ashley, were cannonballing off my deck into the ocean below, shrieking with delight as if they owned the place. But it wasn't just Emma's immediate family. Brad's parents, Robert and Linda, sat in my carefully chosen patio furniture, raising wine glasses in toasts I couldn't hear. His sister Crystal was there with her husband Gary and their twin boys Lucas and Mason, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. They were using my outdoor shower to rinse off sand, treating my private property like their personal beach club. Even worse, I recognized Emma's college friends, Sophie and Hannah, from their social media photos. They were lounging on my deck chairs, taking selfies with the sunset backdrop that I'd dreamed of enjoying in solitude. Everyone looked completely at home, as if this gathering was perfectly normal and planned. The security footage revealed a level of comfort that suggested this wasn't their first visit. Emma moved through the house with confidence, knowing exactly where everything was located. She pointed out features to her guests like a proud homeowner, gesturing toward the kitchen island where I'd planned to write my novel and the master bedroom balcony, where I'd hoped to drink morning coffee in peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Hope you're doing well in Phoenix. Been thinking about you." The timestamp showed she'd sent it 20 minutes ago while simultaneously hosting a party at my house. The casual deception made my stomach churn with a sick mixture of disbelief and rage. I tried calling Emma immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Then I called Brad, whose phone was apparently turned off. The teenagers didn't answer either, which wasn't surprising, given the loud music pounding through my security camera's audio feed. They were all there, all complicit in this violation of my trust, and none of them had the decency to take my calls. Frank called back within the hour, his voice heavy with concern. Thelma, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this has been happening regularly. I kept thinking you'd given them permission, but tonight, when that young man started setting off fireworks on the beach, I knew I had to call you. This is getting out of hand. Fireworks. On my private beach, using my property to create their own personal celebration, while I sat 350 miles away, completely unaware that my sanctuary was being transformed into their playground. The betrayal cut deeper than Stephen's affair ever had, because Emma was my sister. She'd held my hand through the divorce, promised we'd always be there for each other, and helped me choose this very house as my refuge from the pain he'd caused. Now she was turning that refuge into something else entirely, and I had no idea how long it had been going on or how far her deception reached. The 8-hour drive from Phoenix to Carmel felt like the longest journey of my life. I'd called in sick to work thrown clothes into a suitcase and hit the road before dawn, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. How long had Emma been using my house? Who else knew about it? And most importantly, why would my own sister betray me like this? When I finally pulled into my driveway at sunset, the property looked deceptively peaceful. No cars, no people, no sign of the chaos I'd witnessed through the security cameras. But as I walked through my front door, the evidence of recent invasion was everywhere. The hardwood floors were sticky with spilled drinks. Sand had been tracked through every room, grinding into the area rugs I'd saved months to afford. My kitchen counters were stained with red wine rings, and someone had used my good knives to cut limes, leaving deep scratches in the bamboo cutting board I'd bought as a housewarming gift to myself. In my master bathroom, I found damp towels thrown carelessly on the floor and an empty bottle of expensive sunscreen I'd never opened. The guest bedrooms showed signs of recent use with rumpled sheets and personal items forgotten in the rush to clean up. Someone had been sleeping in my beds, using my home like their personal hotel. But it was the garbage that told the real story of what had been happening. As I dragged the overflowing bins to the curb for pickup receipts, fluttered in the ocean breeze, I caught them instinctively and felt my heart sink as I read the details. $300 from Sophie, $300 from Hannah, $250 from someone named Jessica who I'd never heard of. These weren't just family gatherings. Emma had been charging people money to stay at my house. I dumped the entire contents of both garbage bins onto my driveway and started sorting through the evidence. Credit card receipts showed expensive grocery shopping trips charged to cards I didn't recognize. Restaurant receipts from Carmel's finest establishments suggested Emma and her guests had been living well on someone else's dime. Empty bottles of wine that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. Then I found Emma's notebook forgotten beside the outdoor grill. My hands shook as I opened it and read her handwriting, documenting what could only be described as a business operation. Weekend rental schedules, pricing structures, and client contact information filled page after page. $300 per person for weekend stays, $500 for couples, $750 for families wanting the full beach house experience. According to Emma's meticulous records, she'd been running this illegal rental operation for over a month. The notebook showed bookings stretching into the next 3 months, with a wedding party scheduled for the following weekend at $1,500 for 2 nights. My sister had turned my dream retreat into her personal cash machine. I found printed emails in her handwriting folder correspondence with people I'd never met who believed they were renting from the legitimate owner of the property. Emma had created an elaborate fiction describing herself as a successful entrepreneur who'd recently purchased this beachfront paradise and was selectively sharing it with special clients. The emails revealed Emma's carefully crafted persona. She wrote about renovating the kitchen herself, choosing every piece of furniture with care, and working tirelessly with her husband to create their dream home by the sea. She described family memories that had never happened, romantic dinners on the deck with Brad, and peaceful mornings watching sunrise over the Pacific. But the worst discovery was hidden in the back pages of her notebook. Emma had drafted a social media post about her new beachfront property, complete with staged photos of herself in my kitchen, my bedroom, and on my deck. The caption read, "Finally achieved our dream of oceanfront living. Hard work pays off when you never give up on your goals." She'd been building an entire false life around my property, gaining social media followers and real-world admirers who believed in her fictional success story. The photos showed Emma posing with confidence in every room of my house, her smile radiant as she claimed credit for achievements that were entirely mine. I scrolled through her social media profiles on my phone, finding post after post featuring my house over the past 6 weeks. Emma had shared my sunrise views, my carefully chosen decor, and my peaceful deck setting with hundreds of followers who liked and commented on her apparent good fortune. Friends wrote congratulations about her real estate success. Family members expressed pride in her accomplishment, and strangers asked for decorating advice about her beautiful coastal home. The deception was so complete, so thoroughly planned and executed that I began to question my own memory. Had I somehow given Emma permission and forgotten? Had we discussed her using the house and I'd misunderstood? But no, I remembered every conversation we'd had about the property. I'd been clear that this was my private retreat, my sanctuary for healing and writing. Emma had stolen more than just my house. She'd stolen my story, my achievement, my dream, and turned it into her personal brand of success. She was profiting financially while I made mortgage payments and profiting socially while I remained isolated in Phoenix working overtime to afford a property I wasn't even able to enjoy. In the bottom drawer of my kitchen desk, I found something that made my blood run cold. Emma had made copies of my house keys, but not just simple duplicates. She'd gone to a professional locksmith and created an entire set, including keys for doors I'd never given her access to. She had master access to my property and had clearly been planning this operation for much longer than her notebook suggested. The violation felt complete and utterly calculated. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision or a misunderstanding between sisters. Emma had deliberately, systematically, and methodically turned my most precious possession into her personal business venture, and she'd done it with the kind of planning that suggested she'd never intended to stop. I decided to stay hidden in my own house, waiting for Emma's next scheduled rental group to arrive, so I could catch her red-handed with evidence she couldn't deny or explain away. According to her notebook, a wedding party would arrive Saturday evening for a weekend celebration, paying $2,000 for the privilege of using what they believed was Emma's family beach house. I parked my car 3 blocks away at a local coffee shop and walked back along the beach, entering through the side gate that was hidden from the main road. If Emma arrived early to prepare for her guests, I wanted to be positioned where I could record everything without being discovered. The upstairs guest bedroom had the perfect vantage point with windows overlooking the entire deck area and living room. I positioned myself with my phone charged and ready, determined to capture every lie Emma told and every dollar she collected from unsuspecting people who trusted her fictional story about owning this property. But Emma's timing caught me completely off guard. Instead of arriving Saturday evening, as her notebook indicated, she showed up Friday afternoon with the wedding party already in tow, laughing and chatting as if they were old family friends. I heard car doors slamming and excited voices carrying through my windows, and suddenly my hiding spot became a trap. Through the window, I watched Emma embrace a young woman in a flowing white sundress who could only be the bride. "Sarah, welcome to our little piece of paradise." Emma said, her voice carrying the warm confidence of a gracious hostess. "David, you picked the perfect spot for your celebration. This place is magic." The groom, a tall man with sandy hair and an easy smile, shook hands with Emma's husband, Brad, as if they were old friends meeting for a reunion. "We can't thank you enough for sharing your home with us. The photos don't do it justice." I crouched lower behind the window frame, my heart hammering as I realized I was trapped upstairs while strangers filled my living room below. Emma was giving them the same tour she'd given me months earlier when I'd first bought the house, pointing out the vaulted ceilings, the stone fireplace, and the wall of windows facing the Pacific. "We renovated the kitchen ourselves last year." Emma lied smoothly, running her hand along the granite countertops I'd chosen after weeks of research. Brad designed the island to maximize the ocean view while cooking. We wanted every moment in this house to feel connected to the sea. Sarah gasped with delight as Emma opened the sliding doors to the deck. The ceremony will be perfect here at sunset. Your deck is like something out of a fairy tale. My deck, where I'd planned to write my novel Drink Morning Coffee and heal from the wreckage of my marriage. Now it was serving as the backdrop for Emma's latest performance, and I was powerless to stop it without creating a scene that would ruin an innocent couple's wedding celebration. Emma's teenagers arrived separately dropped off by Robert and Linda, who waved goodbye with the casual ease of grandparents familiar with routine family gatherings. Tyler, Madison, and Ashley immediately began acting like entitled hosts, directing the wedding guests toward the best rooms and complaining about having to share their space with strangers. The master bedroom is obviously off-limits, 17-year-old Tyler announced with teenage authority. That's our parents' room. You guys can use the guest rooms, but don't mess with the sound system or the outdoor speakers. We've got everything set up the way we like it. 15-year-old Madison rolled her eyes at her brother's bossiness, but quickly claimed her own territory. The upstairs bathroom is mine during the day for getting ready. You can use the downstairs ones. And please don't leave wet towels on the furniture. Mom gets really upset about water damage to the wood. Their casual ownership of my space felt like physical blows. These children had been raised to believe this house belonged to their family, and their comfort level suggested they'd been spending significant time here. They knew where everything was located, had established routines and preferences, and spoke about house rules as if they'd helped create them. Brad fired up the outdoor grill with practiced efficiency, seasoning steaks and preparing side dishes as if he'd cooked hundreds of meals on my deck. He chatted easily with David about the best local fishing spots and recommended restaurants in Carmel, playing the role of longtime resident and proud homeowner. We've been coming here for family vacations since the kids were little. Brad told the wedding party, his lie flowing as smoothly as Emma's. Saved up for years to finally buy our own place. Best investment we ever made. Nothing beats waking up to the sound of waves and falling asleep to the ocean breeze. I pressed my back against the bedroom wall, overwhelmed by the scope of their deception. They weren't just using my house. They'd created an entire fictional family history around it. Years of vacations that never happened, renovations they'd never completed, memories they'd never actually made. Emma's parents, Dorothy and James, arrived with expensive wine and wedding gifts, embracing Sarah and David like beloved family members, welcoming new additions to their clan. Dorothy complimented Sarah's choice of wedding dress, while James offered David cigars for an after-dinner celebration on the beach. We're so proud of Emma and Brad for creating this beautiful family retreat. Dorothy told the wedding guests, her voice warm with maternal pride. They've worked so hard to give our grandchildren a place to make lifelong memories. This house represents everything they've accomplished together. James nodded in agreement, gesturing toward the ocean with the satisfaction of a man who'd helped his children achieve the American dream. Started from nothing and built something magnificent. That's the kind of legacy worth celebrating. Their genuine pride in Emma's fictional accomplishment made my situation even more surreal. Emma's parents believed their daughter owned this house, believed she'd earned it through hard work and smart decisions. They were celebrating a success that existed only in Emma's imagination, but their emotions were completely real. As evening approached and the wedding celebration moved into full swing, I realized I was witnessing something much larger than simple trespassing. Emma had constructed an elaborate fantasy life, complete with supporting family members who believed in her fiction. The wedding party was just the latest audience for a performance that had been developing for months. From my hiding spot, I recorded everything through my phone, documenting the lies, the casual ownership behaviors, and the money-changing hands as the bride's father handed Emma an envelope thick with cash. But I also recorded something else, the genuine happiness of people celebrating love in what they believed was a generous family's home. Sarah and David had no idea they were participating in a crime. They thought they were experiencing the kindness of new friends who were sharing their beautiful home for a special occasion. Their joy was real, their gratitude sincere, and their trust in Emma complete. I was trapped in my own house watching strangers toast their new marriage in my living room, while my sister collected money for providing them with an experience that belonged to me. The violation was complete, but so was my determination to end it once and for all. I couldn't wait any longer. Watching Emma collect money from the innocent wedding party while claiming ownership of my house pushed me past my breaking point. With trembling fingers, I dialed 911 from my hiding spot upstairs, whispering into the phone about trespassing and fraud happening at my property. The dispatcher seemed confused by my location and put me on hold twice before connecting me with someone who could take my report. "You're calling about the property on Ocean View Drive. We've had several calls about that address recently." My stomach dropped. "Several calls." "Yes, ma'am. The homeowner has been reporting break-ins and harassment from an individual claiming to own the property. Are you the person who's been bothering Mrs. Brad Thompson?" Mrs. Brad Thompson. Emma had not only stolen my house, but had legally changed her last name in the rental documentation to match Brad's, creating an official-sounding identity for her fraud. She'd been calling the police about me. "I am the actual owner of that property," I whispered urgently. "The woman downstairs is my sister, and she's been illegally renting my house to strangers." The dispatcher's tone shifted to something between professional skepticism and gentle concern. "Ma'am, I'm going to send Officer Martinez to the location. He's familiar with this situation. Please remain calm and don't approach the residents until he arrives." Residents. They thought Emma and her family were the legitimate residents being harassed by a delusional woman who claimed to own their house. My sister had not only stolen my property, but had convinced local law enforcement that I was the criminal. 20 minutes later, I heard authoritative knocking on my front door. Through the window, I watched Officer Martinez speak briefly with Emma, who immediately pointed toward the upstairs windows where I was hidden. She looked concerned and slightly frightened, playing the role of a homeowner worried about an unstable intruder. "She's up there again." Emma told Officer Martinez, her voice carrying just the right mixture of frustration and sympathy. "I'm really worried about her mental state since her divorce. She's been fixated on our house for months, claiming we stole it from her. I think she needs professional help, not legal trouble." Officer Martinez nodded with understanding. "We'll handle this gently, Mrs. Thompson. Sometimes people going through personal crisis develop these kinds of fixations. Has she been violent or threatening?" "Not violent, but persistent. She somehow got copies of our keys made and keeps breaking in when we're not here. I've changed the locks twice, but she keeps finding ways inside. My children are scared to come here anymore." The performance was flawless. Emma sounded like a concerned homeowner dealing with a troubled family member who'd lost touch with reality. Her worry seemed genuine, her frustration understandable, and her fear for her family's safety completely believable. "Thelma Morrison, this is Officer Martinez with the Carmel Police Department. I need you to come downstairs slowly with your hands visible. We're going to sort the situation out calmly." I descended the stairs with my mortgage documents, property deed, and identification ready, but Officer Martinez's expression showed he'd already made up his mind about who was telling the truth. Emma stood beside him, with Brad and their teenagers, presenting a unified family front that made me look like an outsider causing problems. "Officer, I own this house," I said, holding out my paperwork. "I have the mortgage, the deed, the insurance policies, everything. This woman is my sister Emma, and she's been illegally renting my property to strangers while telling them she owns it." Officer Martinez examined my documents while Emma shook her head sadly. "She's been carrying those fake papers for months. I don't know where she got them made, but they look very convincing. The real tragedy is that she actually believes they're authentic." Brad nodded in support of his wife's story. "We've been dealing with this since February. Thelma moved out of state after her divorce and started having these episodes. She seems to think our vacation home belongs to her. We've tried to be patient because she's family, but it's gotten out of hand. The wedding party watched this family drama unfold with uncomfortable fascination. Sarah and David exchanged worried glances, clearly wondering if they'd stumbled into something dangerous. Their perfect wedding weekend was being disrupted by what appeared to be a family crisis involving mental health issues and property disputes. Officer Martinez called his dispatcher to run verification on my documents, while Emma continued her performance. "We bought this house 2 years ago with money Brad inherited from his grandfather. Thelma was going through her divorce at the time and became obsessed with the idea that she deserved to inherit something too. I think seeing our success made her mental state worse." "That's a complete lie." I protested, but my voice sounded desperate even to myself. "I bought this house 6 months ago with inheritance from my grandmother Margaret. Emma helped me pick out furniture and paint colors. She knows every detail about my purchase because she was involved in the process." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She remembers conversations we had about decorating our house and somehow transferred those memories to herself. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you love lose touch with reality like this. I've begged her to get professional help, but she refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. Officer Martinez's radio crackled with information from his dispatcher. My mortgage company confirmed the loan, but the verification process would take time. The county recorder's office was closed for the weekend, making immediate confirmation of property ownership impossible. "This is going to take a while to sort out," Officer Martinez told everyone assembled in my living room. "I'm going to need to separate the parties and get detailed statements from everyone involved." Emma hugged Sarah apologetically. "I'm so sorry your wedding weekend is being disrupted by this family situation. Maybe it would be best if you found other accommodations until we get this resolved." The bride looked genuinely distressed about abandoning what she believed were generous hosts dealing with a family crisis. "Are you sure we don't want to add to your stress during such a difficult time?" "Your safety and peace of mind are more important than money," Emma replied with perfect sincerity. "We'll refund your payment completely. Family problems shouldn't ruin your special celebration." She was maintaining her performance even while facing potential exposure, caring more about preserving her reputation with strangers than acknowledging the truth to law enforcement. Emma handed Sarah an envelope of cash, playing the role of gracious hostess who put guests' comfort above financial considerations. David shook Brad's hand gratefully. "You're incredibly generous people. We hope everything works out with your family's situation." As the wedding party packed their belongings and prepared to leave, I realized Emma's strategy was working perfectly. She appeared reasonable, generous, and concerned about family welfare, while I looked increasingly desperate and unstable. The innocent couple left believing they'd encountered a kind family dealing with a troubled relative's delusions. Officer Martinez spent the next 3 hours making phone calls, verifying documents, and taking statements. Emma produced utility bills in her name rental agreements she'd forged, and even social media posts dating back months that supported her claim of ownership. Her documentation looked official and comprehensive, while my proof consisted mainly of recent mortgage paperwork that could theoretically be fabricated. The investigation stretched into the evening as Emma's lies became more elaborate. She provided Officer Martinez with the phone number of a psychiatric facility, where she claimed I'd been treated after my divorce, though she admitted I'd been released and was considered stable. She showed him text messages where I'd allegedly threatened to harm myself if I couldn't live in our house. Every piece of evidence Emma provided painted me as a mentally unstable woman, fixated on property that didn't belong to her. Her concerns seemed genuine, her documentation comprehensive, and her family's support absolute. Brad and the teenagers backed up every detail of her story, creating a convincing unified front that made my claims sound like the delusions of someone who'd lost touch with reality. It took multiple calls to my mortgage company, my bank, and finally the property management company I'd used during the purchase process before Officer Martinez began to believe my version of events. The verification process revealed Emma's documentation was sophisticated but ultimately fraudulent, created through methods that suggested careful planning and professional assistance. When the truth finally emerged, Emma's reaction shocked everyone involved. Instead of apologizing or showing remorse, she became aggressive and defensive. Fine, maybe the paperwork isn't perfect, but I've been maintaining this property for months while Thelma ignored it. I've been paying for utilities, lawn care, and maintenance. I've improved the property value with my renovations and care. I deserve compensation for my work. She actually believed she was entitled to payment for her unauthorized use of my house. Officer Martinez called Detective Sarah Walsh to investigate what was clearly a complex fraud case that went far beyond simple trespassing. Emma's sophisticated documentation and systematic deception suggested professional planning that required specialized investigation. Detective Walsh arrived within an hour, bringing equipment to examine Emma's forged documents and access to databases that revealed the true scope of her deception. What she discovered made everyone involved realize they were dealing with something much more serious than a family property dispute. Emma had visited 3 different notary offices over the past 4 months, using fake identification documents to forge legal paperwork related to my property. She'd attempted to file fraudulent property transfer documents that would have legally transferred ownership from me to herself, claiming I'd become mentally incompetent following my divorce and needed family guardianship of my assets. Detective Walsh found evidence that Emma had consulted with a disbarred attorney named Dennis Burke, who specialized in helping people navigate property law loopholes. Emma had paid Burke $5,000 to research adverse possession claims and guardianship procedures that could be used to legally steal property from family members. The investigation revealed Emma's plan extended far beyond illegal rentals. She'd been systematically documenting every improvement she made to the property, every utility payment, and every day she spent maintaining the house. Her goal was to establish legal residency and then claim ownership through California's adverse possession laws, which allow people to gain title to property they've maintained and improved over time. Emma's rental income was just the beginning. She planned to establish residency for 2 years, then file legal claims that she'd been the true caretaker of an abandoned property whose owner had become mentally incompetent. Her forged documentation would support claims that I'd given her permission to maintain the house during my psychological recovery from divorce trauma. Detective Walsh discovered Emma's detailed journal outlining the entire scheme hidden in her car's glove compartment. The journal revealed months of planning research into property law and careful documentation of my financial struggles during my divorce. Emma had been waiting for me to miss mortgage payments so she could swoop in to buy the property at foreclosure while claiming family rights as my caretaker. But the journal also revealed something much more disturbing: Emma's deep resentment about my inheritance from our grandmother, Margaret. She'd expected to receive money when Margaret died and felt cheated when the inheritance came to me instead. The beach house represented everything Emma believed she deserved, but had been unfairly denied. Thelma always was grandmother's favorite one journal entry read. She got the college money, the car money, and now this inheritance while I've worked twice as hard raising 3 kids and supporting Brad's failed business ventures. It's time for some balance in this family. Emma had convinced herself that stealing my house was actually correcting an injustice rather than committing a crime. She genuinely believed she deserved the property more than I did because her financial needs were greater and her family responsibilities more demanding. The wedding party learned the truth when Detective Walsh contacted them for statements about the money they'd paid Emma. Sarah and David were horrified to discover they'd participated in a crime and demanded to file charges for fraud and emotional distress. Their dream wedding weekend had been ruined by a criminal scheme that exploited their trust and destroyed their special celebration. But Sarah and David weren't Emma's only victims. Detective Walsh's investigation revealed 12 different groups who'd paid money to rent what they believed was Emma's family vacation home. College friends, work colleagues, distant relatives, and strangers who'd found Emma through social media recommendations had all paid between $300 and $1,500 for weekend stays. The total financial fraud exceeded $15,000, but the emotional impact went much deeper. Emma had exploited people's trust, ruined special occasions, and damaged relationships with family and friends who felt betrayed by her elaborate deception. Emma's extended family began learning the truth as Detective Walsh interviewed them about their knowledge of the beach house. Robert and Linda Bradd's parents were devastated to discover their son had participated in fraud. They'd been genuinely proud of Emma and Brad's apparent success and had told friends and neighbors about their children's beautiful oceanfront property. Dorothy and James Emma's parents faced the humiliating realization that they'd been bragging to their community about their daughter's accomplishment when no such accomplishment existed. They'd hosted dinner parties where they showed photos of the beach house and told stories about Emma's business success and real estate investments. The investigation revealed Emma's pattern of deception extended far beyond the house theft. She'd been lying to family and friends about Brad's job stability, their children's academic achievements, and their overall financial situation. The beach house was the centerpiece of an elaborate facade designed to hide years of financial struggles and failed business ventures. Brad's reaction complicated the investigation further. Text messages on his phone showed he'd helped plan the rental scheme and had actively participated in deceiving guests about their ownership of the property. He couldn't claim ignorance. When evidence showed he'd researched rental rates, helped create the booking schedule, and personally collected money from multiple victim families. Emma's teenagers were the only family members who seemed genuinely shocked by the revelations. Tyler, Madison, and Ashley had believed their parents' stories about owning a second home and had never questioned the sudden appearance of luxury in their lives. Their reactions ranged from anger at being lied to embarrassment about participating in their mother's crimes unknowingly. The investigation also revealed that Emma's illegal rental operation had affected the entire neighborhood. Frank Miller wasn't the only neighbor who'd complained about excessive noise traffic and disruption. Other property owners had been considering legal action against what they believed was an irresponsible homeowner who'd turned a quiet residential street into a party destination. Emma's crimes had created ripple effects throughout the community, damaging relationships and property values, while generating complaints that could have resulted in legal problems for me as the actual owner. Her actions had put my reputation and legal standing at risk while she profited from the chaos she created. Detective Walsh explained that Emma faced multiple felony charges, including fraud, identity theft, forgery, and grand theft. The sophisticated nature of her scheme, the involvement of professional criminals like Dennis Burke, and the systematic victimization of multiple families elevated her crimes beyond simple property disputes into serious felony territory. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Emma's deception represented years of planning significant financial investment in forged documents and professional consultation with disbarred attorneys. This wasn't a spontaneous family dispute, but a carefully orchestrated criminal enterprise designed to steal property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The evidence was overwhelming, but Emma continued to maintain that she deserved the property more than I did, and that her actions were justified by family loyalty rather than criminal intent. Detective Walsh's investigation uncovered the deeper motivation behind Emma's elaborate fraud scheme. Financial records subpoenaed from Emma and Brad's bank accounts revealed a family in complete financial collapse, hiding massive debts behind a carefully maintained facade of middle-class stability. Emma and Brad were 3 months behind on their mortgage facing foreclosure on their primary residence in 6 weeks. Credit card debts totaled over $40,000, stemming from Brad's failed construction business and Emma's desperate attempts to maintain their lifestyle while their income disappeared. They owed an additional $30,000 in gambling debts from Brad's addiction to online poker and Emma's weekend trips to tribal casinos. But the most devastating revelation was the timing of Emma's deception. Her elaborate beach house scheme had been motivated by her upcoming 20-year high school reunion, scheduled for the weekend after the wedding party I'd witnessed. Emma had invited 50 former classmates to a reunion weekend at her beach house, charging each person $400 for what she described as an exclusive gathering at her new oceanfront property. Emma had collected $20,000 in advance payments for a reunion designed to cement her image as the most successful member of her graduating class. Former classmates were traveling from across the country, expecting to celebrate their host's remarkable achievements while enjoying a luxury weekend by the Pacific Ocean. The reunion guest list read like a catalog of Emma's insecurities and social ambitions. High school cheerleaders who'd ignored her former boyfriends who'd moved on to successful careers, and academic achievers who'd received college scholarships while Emma struggled through community college. She'd promised them all a glimpse into her perfect life, complete with beachfront property and obvious financial success. Detective Walsh found email correspondence between Emma and reunion attendees that revealed the depth of her deception. She described renovating the house herself, shared fictional stories about family vacations and romantic anniversaries by the ocean, and positioned herself as someone who'd overcome humble beginnings to achieve the American dream. Finally ready to show everyone what hard work and determination can accomplish, Emma had written to her former classmates. This house represents everything Brad and I have built together. Can't wait to celebrate our success with the people who knew us when we were just kids with big dreams. The irony was devastating. Emma's desperate scheme to project success was creating public humiliation on a scale she'd never imagined. Her reunion guests began arriving Friday evening to find police cars' crime scene tape and local news crews covering her arrest. The image she'd worked so desperately to protect was being destroyed in the most public way possible. Brad faced conspiracy charges for his participation in the fraud scheme, but his cooperation with Detective Walsh's investigation revealed additional layers of deception. Emma had convinced him that stealing from me was justified because our grandmother's inheritance should have been divided equally between us. She'd manipulated Brad's guilt about their financial failures, arguing that my apparent success was unearned, while their struggles were proof of greater virtue. Brad's parents, Robert and Linda, were forced to mortgage their retirement home to pay legal fees for their son's defense. The elderly couple had been looking forward to quiet golden years, but instead found themselves working part-time jobs to afford attorneys and cope with the shame of their son's criminal charges. Emma's parents, Dorothy and James, faced their own humiliation as news of the fraud spread through their social circle. They'd been bragging about Emma's success for months, showing photos of the beach house to friends and neighbors who now knew the truth about their daughter's criminal activities. The elderly couple struggled with guilt about enabling Emma's lying throughout her life and failing to recognize the warning signs of her desperation. Emma's children suffered consequences that extended far beyond their mother's legal troubles. Tyler was rejected from several colleges when admissions officers learned about his family's criminal charges. Madison and Ashley were removed from their private school due to unpaid tuition and the scandal surrounding their parents' fraud. The teenagers who'd believed they were part of a successful family suddenly faced social stigma and financial uncertainty. The civil lawsuits began arriving within days of Emma's arrest. Sarah and David filed suit demanding compensation for their ruined wedding celebration and emotional distress. The 12 families who'd paid rental fees demanded full refunds plus damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. Emma's former high school classmates who'd paid reunion fees wanted their money back, along with compensation for travel expenses and lost vacation time. Frank Miller and other neighborhood residents filed a class action lawsuit against Emma for property damage, noise violations, and decreased property values caused by her illegal rental operation. Their quiet residential street had been transformed into a party destination, affecting their peaceful retirement and potentially reducing their home values. The financial liability from civil lawsuits alone exceeded $100,000, far beyond Emma and Brad's ability to pay, even if they weren't facing criminal prosecution. Their bankruptcy seemed inevitable, but bankruptcy wouldn't protect them from criminal penalties or resolve the family relationships destroyed by Emma's systematic deception. I faced the most difficult decision of the entire ordeal, whether to show mercy to Emma's children or demand full prosecution that would send their mother to prison for years. Dorothy and James begged me to consider the teenagers' welfare and their future prospects if Emma served significant prison time. Robert and Linda pleaded for their son's rehabilitation rather than punishment, arguing that Brad was more victim than criminal in Emma's manipulation. The pressure from family members was intense, but Detective Walsh warned me that showing mercy might encourage Emma to continue her pattern of deception and manipulation. Emma had shown no genuine remorse, instead, maintaining that her actions were justified by family financial needs and my apparent selfishness in not sharing my inheritance. Emma's arrest became local news when reporters learned about the reunion weekend disruption and the sophisticated nature of her fraud scheme. Former classmates gave interviews describing their shock at discovering Emma's deception and their sympathy for the family members who'd been victimized by someone they'd trusted. The media coverage completed Emma's humiliation, transforming her from someone desperately seeking social recognition into a cautionary tale about the dangers of living beyond your means and the consequences of deceiving people who trust you. Her reunion weekend became a symbol of how criminal behavior destroys the very relationships and reputation it's designed to protect. As Emma sat in jail, unable to make bail, the facade she'd worked so hard to maintain crumbled, completely revealing the fear, desperation, and deep-seated insecurity that had driven her to risk everything for the appearance of success that was never real. The courtroom was packed with Emma's victims when she finally stood before Judge Patricia Morrison for sentencing. Sarah and David sat in the front row, holding hands as they prepared to give victim impact statements about their ruined wedding celebration. Behind them sat the 12 families who'd paid money to rent what they believed was Emma's beachfront property, their faces showing a mixture of anger and betrayal. Emma pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges, including grand theft fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The plea agreement required her to admit full responsibility for her crimes and provide complete restitution to all victims. In exchange, she would receive a sentence of 3 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Judge Morrison read each charge aloud, detailing how Emma's systematic deception had affected dozens of people who'd trusted her with their money, their special occasions, and their belief in her integrity. Mrs. Thompson, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of family trust and community faith. You exploited people's generosity and kindness for personal profit while showing complete disregard for the emotional and financial harm you were causing. But the most powerful moment of the sentencing came when Emma's own children testified against her pattern of deception. Tyler, Madison, and Ashley had requested permission to address the court despite their father's objections and their grandparents' concerns about family loyalty. 17-year-old Tyler spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotional weight of publicly confronting his mother's crimes. Your Honor, I want the court to know that my siblings and I are deeply sorry for our participation in these activities. We believed our parents when they told us we owned a beach house and were embarrassed that we didn't question how our family could suddenly afford such luxury. Tyler's statement revealed the courage required for a teenager to admit his mother had been lying to him throughout the entire ordeal. He acknowledged participating in Emma's deception, but explained that he genuinely believed his family's sudden wealth was legitimate, even though it seemed inconsistent with their previous financial struggles. Madison, now 16, addressed the emotional impact of learning about her mother's systematic dishonesty. I posted photos from that house on social media because I thought it belonged to our family. Now I understand that every photo was documenting a crime, and I feel terrible about misleading my friends and followers. I've learned that honest poverty is better than fake wealth built on lies. Her statement showed remarkable maturity for someone who'd been raised to believe appearance mattered more than integrity. Madison's acknowledgement of her family's real financial situation demonstrated growth beyond her years and a commitment to honesty that her mother had never modeled. 13-year-old Ashley struggled through tears as she apologized directly to me. "Aunt Thelma, I'm sorry we used your house and pretended it was ours. I know you bought it to feel better after your divorce, and we made it into something that hurt you instead of helped you. I wish Mom had asked for help instead of just taking what didn't belong to us." Ashley's apology revealed her understanding that the beach house represented more than just property to me. She recognized that Emma's theft had violated my emotional healing process, not just my financial investment. Her recognition of the deeper harm showed empathy that Emma herself had never demonstrated. Their public testimony against their mother's behavior shocked the courtroom and demonstrated remarkable courage for teenagers facing social stigma and family disruption. They chose honesty over loyalty, integrity over family unity, and truth over the comfort of maintaining Emma's lies. Emma's response to her children's testimony revealed her continued inability to accept responsibility for her actions. "They don't understand the pressure I was under to provide for our family," she told Judge Morrison. "Everything I did was motivated by love and desperation, not greed or selfishness. I was trying to save our family from financial ruin and give my children the opportunities they deserved." Even facing prison time, Emma maintained that her intentions justified her methods. She showed no recognition that her children's honesty and courage surpassed anything she demonstrated throughout the entire ordeal. Her response focused on her own victimization rather than the harm she'd caused to people who'd trusted her. Judge Morrison's sentence included $48,000 in restitution to all victims, covering rental fees, wedding expenses, reunion payments, and emotional distress damages. The court ordered Emma to publicly apologize to each victim group and to participate in financial counseling and mental health treatment during her imprisonment and probation. Brad received a lighter sentence of 18 months in county jail and 3 years probation in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation and his willingness to take responsibility for his participation. His parents, Robert and Linda, agreed to supervise his rehabilitation and help him find legitimate employment after his release. But the most important development came after the sentencing, when Tyler Madison and Ashley approached me with handwritten letters they'd prepared independently. Each letter demonstrated their understanding of the difference between legal consequences and family relationships, acknowledging that their mother's crimes didn't have to define their own futures. Tyler's letter focused on his plans for college and career, explaining how his mother's deception had motivated him to pursue success through honest work rather than shortcuts and lies. He asked for my guidance in choosing colleges he could afford, with financial aid demonstrating his commitment to realistic goals based on genuine achievement. Madison wrote about her new interest in marine biology, inspired by legitimate visits to my beach house after Emma's arrest. She asked if she could occasionally visit to study ocean ecosystems for school projects, showing respect for my ownership while expressing genuine intellectual curiosity about coastal environments. Ashley's letter was the most moving, expressing her desire to rebuild family relationships based on honesty rather than shared deception. She asked if we could start over as aunt and niece without the complicated history of her mother's crimes affecting their potential friendship. Their letters convinced me to support reduced restitution in exchange for Emma's complete admission of guilt and public apology to all victims. I realized that punishing Emma's children for their mother's crimes wouldn't serve justice or healing, while showing them mercy might encourage their continued growth toward integrity and responsibility. The beach house finally became the sanctuary I'd originally envisioned, but it also became something more, a place where broken family relationships could be rebuilt on foundations of honesty rather than deception. I began hosting Tyler Madison and Ashley for supervised visits, helping them understand the difference between earned success and stolen luxury. Emma's prison letters showed gradual recognition of her destructive choices, but her apologies remained focused on consequences rather than genuine remorse for harming people who'd trusted her. Her transformation appeared more calculated than authentic, designed to improve her chances for early parole rather than demonstrate real character growth. The story's resolution came not through Emma's redemption, but through her children's courage to choose integrity over loyalty. Tyler graduated high school with honors and received scholarship support for college. Madison discovered genuine passion for marine science through honest study rather than fake ownership of oceanfront property. Ashley learned to find joy in simple pleasures like beach walks and tide pool exploration rather than material possessions designed to impress others. Frank Miller became an unexpected friend, teaching me about coastal gardening and neighborhood history, while helping me establish legitimate relationships with permanent residents rather than Emma's temporary rental guests. His patience during the crisis and continued support afterward showed me that genuine community is built on trust and mutual respect rather than impressive facades. The beach house transformed from a symbol of stolen success into a testament to the power of honest relationships and authentic achievement. Writing my novel in that peaceful setting became not just personal healing, but a reminder that genuine accomplishment requires patience, integrity, and respect for other people's trust. My final lesson came from watching Emma's children choose their own paths despite their mother's negative example. Their courage to testify against family deception, their commitment to honest relationships, and their determination to build legitimate success showed that character isn't inherited, but chosen through daily decisions to value truth over convenience. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who test our integrity the deepest. I'd love to hear about your experiences with difficult family situations in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding your authentic path. Share this with someone who needs to remember that genuine success is built on honesty, not deception. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that your integrity is worth more than any material possession someone might try to steal from you.